Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. Here to wish you a very happy Morrissey Monday, my weekly celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths. And in this week's episode, you need to grab your Jenkos, your belly chains, and your platform Chuck Taylors, because we're going back to 1997 to talk about Morrissey's sixth solo studio album, the divisive and somewhat controversial among Morrissey fans, Maladjusted. Now, this album came out on August 11th, 1997, and I really like this record. I really have. Really, from the time it came out, I remember I got this record pretty much right when it came out. One of the fun things about this record, to me, however, is the fact that it is so divisive. It is such a topic of conversation among Morrissey fans. I think that's one of the funnest things about this record, is the conversations that people have with this album. I have really, over my years of fandom, in my experience talking to people who are both Morrissey and non-Morrissey fans, I love hearing the wide spectrum of opinions about Maladjusted. I've heard some people say that it is the weakest record in Morrissey's catalog. I've heard other people say that they absolutely love it. On the video, my first video on this channel when I did my Morrissey ranking, I believe I ranked it number 15 out of the 19 albums I ranked. I said this at the time, I'll say it again. I think that I was actually a little bit surprised that this album fell so low on that ranking, because I genuinely do really like this album. I did like it when it first came out. Now, speaking of people's opinions and the wide variety of ideas that people have about this album, on that very first video on this channel where I ranked Morrissey's catalog, somebody left me a comment saying that they would take this album over Viva Hate. I mean, that's a statement. That's saying something. I like that. Not saying that I necessarily agree with it, because I don't. I mean, Viva Hate is one of the holy grails of the Morrissey catalog, in my opinion. But if you're going to take the time to leave a comment on somebody's YouTube channel, say something, make a statement. I like that. Like I said, I don't necessarily agree with that. I wouldn't take this album over Viva Hate, like any way, shape, or form. But I do remember when this album first came out. I do remember I got it pretty much the day it came out. And of course, this album is just so very different in the Morrissey catalog. I mean, all of Morrissey's albums are. I think that's why we love him so much. I think that's why he has continued to pique our interest or keep our interest. But even having said that, within the Morrissey catalog, this album is very unique. I remember when it first came out, the first time I listened to it, it kind of threw me off a little bit. Even the artwork, I remember when this record first came out, I didn't particularly love the artwork. I was kind of like, what is he doing? What is this? The color scheme I wasn't really in love with. But over the years, maybe just because it is Maladjusted, maybe this is just that album in the catalog, kind of the redheaded stepchild to a lot of people. Even the artwork, to me, has kind of grown on me. And I really like this record. But like I said, I do like hearing people's opinions about this album. This is an album that tends to trigger a response from Morrissey fans. Some positive, some negative. Now, admittedly, I am also very sort of sentimental about this record because this was the first tour I ever saw. I saw this tour on October 8th, 1997 at the Warfield in San Francisco. And I don't know if at that time or any time in my life really I've ever been more excited to see an artist that I had never seen before. I remember my friend and I went to that show together. If you haven't been to the Warfield in San Francisco, that is biased being a Bay Area guy, but the the Warfield is one of my favorite music venues of all time. Now, it can't touch the Fillmore, in my opinion, which is my all-time favorite music venue, but the Warfield is great too. I remember my friend and I got into San Francisco early that day, and at the time, I had no idea, or I didn't realize, I guess, that Morrissey was playing 2 nights in San Francisco. So my friend and I got into town early. We did some record shopping. I remember we were at the Big Tower Records in San Francisco. Of course, it's long gone now, but it used to be this just amazing, huge Tower Records in San Francisco that I would always frequent back in those days. And I remember hearing 2 people talking in the store near me, overhearing them say, one of them telling the other one that they had seen Morrissey the night before. And as soon as I heard him say that, my blood absolutely ran cold. I was just deathly afraid that I had missed the show the night before. I had gotten the date wrong. So I remember I had my ticket in my pocket. Back in those days, of course, you got the paper tickets. I pulled my ticket out, checked the date, which said October 8th, 1997. And that was the date it was. And I was just completely confused. Again, like I said, I didn't know that he was playing 2 nights in San Francisco on that tour. So I told my friend, I was like, we got to go. We got to get down to the Warfield and find out what the hell is going on. So we ended up leaving. We got down to the show super early because I was really panicking that I had missed the show. Got down there really pretty early. We were one of the first ones in line, which I guess was a benefit to getting there early, and realized that he was playing 2 nights in San Francisco. I would have probably gone to both had I known, but I didn't. So we went to the show on October 8th, and I thought the show was really great. Of course, it was my first time seeing him. I couldn't have been any more excited. Like I said, I don't know if I've ever been more excited to see an artist for the first time ever than I was seeing the big guy on this tour in 1997. He came out. I don't remember the entire set list right now off the top of my head. I'm sure I could find it online. But I do remember the show I thought was really good. My friend and I, like I said, we got there early. We had floor seats, so we got relatively close. I thought the show was really good. I thought that Morrissey was in pretty good spirits. I have since gone back and read and seen things talking about that tour, how some people said that he was sort of disinterested in that tour. He wasn't really in the best mood. I do have a live bootleg from that tour. I think a lot of people have it. The LA Turnaround bootleg, which I actually think is really good. I think it was recorded a couple days after this show in San Francisco. Now, there's always been this conspiracy theory, at least in the Bay Area. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But I've always heard this conspiracy theory by fans in the San Francisco area that Morrissey hates San Francisco. He usually kind of underperforms there. I've seen him a few times in the Bay Area. Some aren't the best shows I've ever seen, but the show at the Warfield, the first show I ever went to, I thought was really good. Now, I would love to find, one thing I would love to find, if it's out there, is a good quality sounding bootleg of that first show I ever went to. I have seen there is a video on YouTube of a pretty poor recording of that first show I ever went to. I have listened to it a couple times, but it is kind of hard to get through it. But that was such a fun show, such an exciting time. The first time I ever saw him. Now, this record to me, Maladjusted, like I said, when I ranked the Morrissey ranking, this was number 15 out of the 19 albums that I ranked. But for me, I really do like this record. It is definitely a huge step up from the record before it, Southpaw Grammar, which I believe I told you on my Morrissey ranking is my least favorite Morrissey album, still is. I hate saying anything like that. I hate putting least favorite or disliked when it comes to anything to do with Morrissey. But I thought this album was a huge step up from Southpaw Grammar. Now, this album, when I first heard it, it sounded very different than anything else in his catalog. I thought the songwriting was very different than anything in his catalog. This record was produced by Steve Lillywhite, who produced Southpaw Grammar as well. Now, one of my complaints about Southpaw Grammar, and I'll probably get to that album at some point on these, when I go into these Morrissey Mondays, but one thing I don't like about Southpaw Grammar, apart from I just don't think the songs are quite as good as some of the other songs in Morrissey's catalog, is I really hate the production on Southpaw Grammar. And Steve Lillywhite is a producer that I typically really love, and I really do like the production on this record. I really like the songwriting on this record. Again, it sounds very different. I've heard some people say that they thought that Morrissey's songwriting was sort of lackluster on this record. I've heard some people say that his performance sounds kind of disinterested or half interested at best. I really disagree. Again, I don't know why this is a record that I've just always really liked. I do stand behind it now. Obviously, it's no You Are the Quarry or really any of the records in the upper echelon of his catalog. I'm not going to sit here and argue and try and convince you that this is a top 10 record by any stretch of the imagination, because I don't believe that. But I've always really liked this album. The album kicks off with the title track, Maladjusted. Man, I really love that song. I really like how the song starts, how it kicks off the record. I think Maladjusted is a great song. The next song, of course, is probably the most well-known song off the record, Alma Matters. I just went and saw Morrissey last week down here in Nashville and Memphis, and that was a song on the off of this record that he played. That's usually the case. I've seen him several times, obviously. Every time I've seen him is since this record came out. And he typically sort of mixes Alma Matters into the set. I think it's a great live song. I remember also when this album first came out, the first time I saw the video for Alma Matters, it was a little disconcerting at the time. I remember Morrissey in that video. Now, he's obviously always been very sort of slender and has always kept himself in very good shape. But I do remember thinking that, man, he is skinny in this video. Is he, like, okay? Is he healthy? Because he is, like, unusually skinny in the Alma Matters video. And his hair was also, I remember his hair was also kind of off. He looks incredibly young in that video, too, at least to me, even watching it now. Or maybe especially watching it now. He looks just insanely young in that video. But I do love the song Alma Matters. I always like seeing it live. It's a song, one of the songs off this record I really never get tired of. I wouldn't say it's the best song on this record by any stretch. But I always like seeing it live. I still like the video, too. Like I said, when that video first came out, I was shocked at how skinny he was. Also, one thing, speaking of appearance, I remember, speaking of the album art, which, as I said at the time, I didn't love when it first came out. It's kind of grown on me. Again, it's just maladjusted. This is sort of an album you just kind of have to accept for who it is. But I do remember when this album cover came out, people were sort of confused by the portrait of Morrissey on it. I do remember one person I knew, a friend of mine, sort of jokingly said, "Is Morrissey homeless? Is he doing okay financially? He looks like shit on this video. What happened to his swanky clothes and everything?" I don't know why that just popped into my mind as a memory I just remembered, but I do remember the Alma Matters video. I like that video still. I love that song. I really do. And of course, he plays it a lot, and I really do like seeing it live. The third song is Ambitious Outsiders. I like this song. It isn't necessarily really a high point on the record for me personally. I do like it. I think there's a couple sort of lesser moments on this record, because I do think that this record has a lot of really great songs on it. Ambitious Outsiders to me is one of the weaker points. It's not the weakest, but it's okay. I don't really skip it. I don't dislike it. I don't know that there's really There's maybe one song on this record that I sort of actively dislike. It's definitely not Ambitious Outsiders. I like that song. The next song is Trouble Loves Me. This is a song I really love. One of the songs I listen to probably the most off of this record. I love the lyrics to this song. I love the tempo. I love his performance. I love the production on this song. Again, I think it's one of those songs that fits this record perfectly. It's a little bit different than everything else in his catalog. I mean, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Everything in his catalog is different. This record sort of is probably the most different in some ways. The next song is Papa Jack. I really love that song a lot too. Very sad, great lyrics, great performance. After that is probably my favorite song off of Maladjusted. A song that I think is probably, I wouldn't say it's not like a top 10 Morrissey song in my opinion. But the song Ammunition, I absolutely love that song. That was definitely, I say definitely, it was probably my favorite song off this record. It's one I never get tired of. I mean, that one, that one is one that could probably sneak into my top 20 all-time favorite Morrissey songs. I mean, that's a tough list to get into. But I do love the song Ammunition. The next song after that is Wide to Receive, another song I really like a lot. One of the higher songs for me on this record. Again, there's really nothing too weak off of this album. Sometimes when people get real divisive about this album, it confuses me. Like I said, this was such a huge step up to me from Southpaw Grammar. Now, I know typically a lot of Morrissey fans, I think it's safe to say, like Southpaw Grammar more than this one. I really disagree. I think that this one is so much better. Wide to Receive is a great song. The next song is another one of my favorites off of this album. Roy's Keene. I think everybody really likes that song. I think that is one that most people who, whether you like this record or not, I think Roy's Keene is a song that a lot of people can agree with. I think it's one of the higher points off of this album. The next song is He Cried. That's a good one. That's a goodie. That might actually be my second favorite song off this album. Very sort of prototypical Morrissey, if that is such a thing. I really love the song He Cried. I love the songwriting. I love his performance on that album, on that song. And I just think that is one of the higher points on this record. The next song is easily the weakest song on this record for me. Of all of the albums in Morrissey's catalog, I would say that this is one of the easiest ones to pick the weakest song, probably apart from Ringleader of the Tormentors, which I think I've told you my least favorite song off Ringleader of the Tormentors is Please, Dear God, Please Help Me, which is probably my least favorite Morrissey song of all time. But this one, Sorrow Will Come in the End, kind of a weird sort of spoken word. I just am not really into this song. This one is pretty much a skipper every time, in my opinion. Not that it's terrible, it's not offensive, it's just I don't particularly enjoy it. It is definitely the easy low point for me on this album. And this album ends with a song I really love a lot. Again, a very, very sort of Morrissey song lyrically and performance-wise. Satan Rejected My Soul. I absolutely love that song. Very much a high point to end the record on, especially after the sort of Sorrow Will Come in the End, which I don't particularly love. Now, when this record came out, of course, like I said, even among Morrissey fans, this album was met with sort of lukewarm reception, even among the most diehard fans. But of course, critically, this album also sort of fell a little bit flat. I remember that both Spin and the NME gave this album like 6 out of 10. I think it was like Entertainment Weekly or one of those other rags gave it like 3 out of 5. I think that this portion, the record, I don't think commercially did as well as Morrissey wanted it to do. I mean, this record, after this record came out, which it came out on Island Records, after this record came out, after the tour cycle, Morrissey was dropped by the label, citing it as a commercial failure. I think that one of the things that this album fell victim to as well, at least in my opinion, if you go back and you remember kind of what was happening in 1997 musically, it seemed like the trends and the currents in music were sort of changing. And I don't know that Morrissey was somebody who at that point in time had a huge, maybe casual appeal. Now, obviously, Morrissey's always going to have us diehard lunatics. But I do remember around 1997 when this record came out, it did seem like Morrissey's sort of casual appeal wasn't necessarily at an all-time low, but I do think that people were sort of moving on from quote-unquote alternative music, whatever that meant, going back to like the early 90s. It just seemed like the trends in music were sort of changing, and I'm not making excuses. I love this album. I don't care what you think. I don't care if I was the only one that ever bought a copy. I love this record. But I do think that there were things that were kind of working against this record at the time. Of course, after this record came out, Morrissey finished his tour cycle. He entered compilation land for the next 7 years. It wasn't until 7 years later, of course, as we all know, that Morrissey put out his next original studio album, which was the amazing You Are the Quarry. I can't wait to get into that album on this channel, which completely blew this record away. Sometimes I think also, looking back on it, one of the things that makes this record maybe a lesser favorite among Morrissey fans is the fact that it was the predecessor to You Are the Quarry, which is just one of, I think, the greatest. Not only do I think it's one of the greatest albums in the catalog, I know that among Morrissey fans it is easily one of the most celebrated, if not the most celebrated album in the solo catalog, at least. So the fact that this one sort of maybe has become a little bit more forgotten or overlooked is somewhat understandable. Like I said, I love this record. And again, one of the funnest things about this album to me is the fact that it is such a conversation piece among Morrissey fans. People seem to be very opinionated about this record. I think when I initially did my Morrissey ranking video, which was the first video on this channel, I sort of misspoke a little bit when I said that this album is forgotten and overlooked. I actually don't really think that. I think that this album isn't necessarily overlooked and forgotten. I think it is just divisive and controversial. I think people definitely have strong opinions on it. I do. I really like this record. Again, I'm not going to sit here and argue that this thing should be in your top 10. And to the person who commented saying that this thing is better than Viva Hate, I appreciate that comment. I appreciate all your comments on this channel, by the way. But and I do appreciate the fact that you are willing to make a sort of unpopular comment or have an unpopular opinion. I just do not agree. I mean, Viva Hate is like the I think it's my top 3 or 4 probably. Anyway, before I get out of here this week, you probably saw this a couple days ago. Morrissey, a little bit of Morrissey news to give us a little bit of a glimmer of hope. I think any of us who are have been disappointed by the whole Bonfire of Teenagers debacle. Morrissey this week appeared on Good Morning New York. Gave an interview in which he talked a little bit about the Bonfire of Teenagers situation. He was asked about it. By the way, I want to give a shout out to, her name was Rosanna Scotto, who interviewed Morrissey. It was just a little 9-minute clip. You can easily find it on YouTube. You've probably seen it already. If you're a Morrissey fan, you've probably seen it. I do want to give her some credit. I thought her interview was actually very good, being sort of a mainstream news figure. I thought Morrissey appeared very charming, very nice, very approachable. Of course, he looked great. He looked inspired. How can you not be inspired being in New York City? If you're not inspired in New York City, chances are it's just never going to happen. But she was asked about the Bonfire of Teenagers situation. Of course, the situation that's been going on for quite some time with Capitol Records. He intimated in that interview that Capitol Records is willing to give him the record back for what he called a certain price. He didn't really elaborate on what that meant. We are left to sort of speculate at this point in time. She asked him also a follow-up question, which I appreciated, which was, is there any sort of timeline in which we might actually hear this record? He did not have a timeline to give. He did say it was just a matter of when all of this stuff would get ironed out. He did talk about it, and she asked him about the record. Of course, as you and I all know, or as we all know, Morrissey has been saying that this is probably the greatest record he's ever done. Now, I think that will be left up to us, the jury, at the end of the day. But he did talk about the fact that this record, of course, as we all know, was recorded in 2021. It's a very personal record for him. He said it is, again, he said this in the past, he thinks it's the best record he's ever done. And the fact that this record sits on a shelf somewhere within, probably in the vault of Capitol Records, has been very torturous for him. And I know, speaking only for myself as a Morrissey fan, torturous for me. But I did think that the interview he gave on Good Day New York was great. I actually have to give a lot of credit to the journalist Rosanna Scotto. I thought she was actually really good. She seemed to do her research. She seemed to at least know a little bit superficially going into it. Morrissey was dressed impeccably, looked great, seemed to be in a good mood, looked happy enough, I guess, at least according to sort of Morrissey standards. He looked happy enough. And of course, after that, he did perform his newest song, of course, The Telephone Rings, which is a song he is sort of pimping very hard. Again, I think I told you this on the last video, the Memphis and Nashville review show. He did play that song both in Memphis and Nashville. And I was going to say this on that video, and I sort of forgot. I do these videos sort of stream of consciousness. I'm sure you're shocked to hear that. But one thing I will say, and this is a minor complaint, minor grievance, but one thing I wish he would have done on the 40th anniversary tour, instead of playing that song, which was good, it was a song I knew, like I said on the video, is a song I had never heard a studio version of. It's sort of hard to gauge. The performance of it on the Good Morning New York this week was good. I do think the band sounds good. Somebody left a comment on my show review talking about the Waylon Jennings song. I said that sounded flat. Somebody said that they thought the song sounded flat because his band was shit. I disagree. Respectfully disagree. Now, is this band the Alan White Boz band? Of course not. But I actually thought his band sounded good. I don't really quite understand why the Waylon Jennings song kind of fell flat in both Memphis and Nashville. I thought it did. If you think his band was shit, I respectfully disagree with you. I think his band sounds good. I don't think they're as good as the classic Morrissey band. I don't think any of us do. But one thing I will say, going back real quick to last week, was instead of playing, of course, The Telephone Rings, maybe this is just me, I really wanted to hear Rebels Without Applause live. I love that song. So I was a little disappointed, Steve, that you played, of course, The Telephone Rings instead of Rebels Without Applause, but that's just me being snippety, I guess, a little bit. It was great. I'm not complaining. I loved the show. I love both shows. Go back and watch the review video if you haven't seen it. I don't want to rehash the whole thing. But there is maybe, perhaps, a glimmer of hope for those of us who are dying to hear the Bonfire of Teenagers. I know I am. Supposedly there's a second record in the can, Without Music the World Dies, which I'm extremely excited about as well. But, you know, we were supposed to have Bonfire of Teenagers towards the beginning of this year. And the fact that it's sitting unreleased, I will second what Morrissey said on Good Morning New York. It is just torturous knowing that this record is done and I can't have my fat, grubby mitts all over it. Anyway, hopefully that gave us a little bit of a glimmer of hope. I do want to say that I thought the interview was great. You've probably seen it already. I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard, most likely, but if you haven't seen it, go back and check it out. It's on YouTube. Anyway, man, thank you so much for checking out this video. This is Archaic Records in Nashville. My name is Jamie. Be sure to go out and support your local record store. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check back every week for Morrissey Monday, a weekly celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths. Go back and revisit Maladjusted. Give it a fresh set of ears. If you don't like it, that's fine, but just give it another chance, man. Come on, this is like our redheaded stepchild of our sort of catalog, if you will, of fandom. Be sure to check back on this channel periodically for other record content. Now, I have been sort of neglecting the non-Morrissey Monday content on this channel. I've just been swamped with other stuff going on. I know that's a lame excuse. You care. Come on, admit you don't care. But I will be getting back into it. I got hundreds of records over there to get into. My wife and I are going to see Kiss tonight here in Nashville for the End of the Road tour. I talked about earlier on this channel. I did a video on the first Kiss album. I'll probably do more of the Kiss albums, I said on that video. I'm a casual Kiss fan, and I am a fan of the first original era of the band at least. So I'll be talking more about Kiss on this channel. But my wife and I are off to Bridgestone Arena tonight in Nashville to see Kiss. So I will be bringing you at least a show review show this week. Hopefully some other fun stuff going on around the Kiss show. My wife, who is very sort of not a huge Kiss fan, it's kind of funny. She's actually really excited to go, which kind of makes me chuckle a little bit. But I think we are going to try and do some fun stuff tonight around the Kiss show. And I will keep you posted on that. Anyway, man, like I said, thank you so much for checking out these videos. I really do appreciate it more than you know. Feel free to join the conversation in the comments section. Let me know what you think of Maladjusted. Like I said, this is one of the funnest albums in the Morrissey catalog to talk about, just because we as a fan base, and I think that this is one of the best things about Morrissey fans, we are so loyal, so devoted, just utterly committed to this music, to this man's art, that I do find this album one of the funnest in the catalog to talk about, because it is one of those records, one of the few records that some people just genuinely don't really like. So it's fun to hear, not negativity. I'm not really into like negativity, but it's fun to hear people's differing opinions on this. Like I said, I've heard opinions that run the gamut. I've heard people say this is the worst thing he's ever done. And as of recently, I heard somebody say it was actually better than Viva Hate. How about that, my friend? Anyway, thank you again so much for checking out this video. I appreciate it. And until next time, my friends, I will talk to you then.